Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Fantasy Fangirls podcast, where two sisters dive deep into beloved fantasy lore, characters, themes, series, and more.
I'm Lexi.
I'm Nicole.
And today is our episode 4 deep dive of A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas, where we're covering chapters 20 through 28. As always, let's start with our content warnings. While we're focusing today's discussion on chapters 20 through 28 of Silver Flames, all of our episodes include spoilers for this entire book and the ACOTAR series as a whole. While the majority of each Silver Flames episode does not include spoilers for the rest of Sarah J. Maas' series, our deep dive of this book, and especially today's Suriel segment, will continue in our Maasverse Madness. And what that is at the end of every episode, we will give a big spoiler warning before we bring in references from other SJM books, specifically the Crescent City series.
So with all that said, if you don't know why we're going back to Spice Watch today and looking into how Nesta is continuing her father's possible legacy, then please go finish the books. We will be here when you're done.
Next, we at Fantasy Fangirls are adults who say adult things about adult books, especially today. In other words, friends, this podcast is rated R.
We are about to talk about the mother of all dining room scenes today. And that is not the only oral sex scene that we have. So please be mindful of those little listening ears, especially in this episode. However, on a more serious note, we are going to be discussing a scene with a flashback to sexual assault. We will give another trigger warning before we dive into that flashback, but please do listen to your comfort level.
Friendly reminder as we deep dive Silver Flames, we recognize that this book is divisive among the fandom, and it's okay for this community to have different opinions about characters and perspectives. With that said, please be respectful both to us and to others as the conversation continues on other channels. And of course, we are so excited to see you at upcoming live events. We will be at the Swords and Shadows Masquerade by Mountains of Magic in Highlands Ranch, Colorado on November 23rd.
We also cannot wait to ring in the new year at Fantastique Collection's New Year's Eve drop party in Denver, Colorado.
We are partnering with Barnes & Noble for the ONYX Storm Midnight Release Party on January 20th, 2025 in Glendale, Colorado.
And if you're like, that's a lot of Colorado, where is the other love for the states? We are going to be podcasting partners at Romantasy BookCon in Los Angeles, California on February 20th through 22nd, 2025. Links to all of these events and even more info are in the show notes.
And lastly, if you love Fantasy Fangirls and have been loving this ACOTAR series journey we're on together, if you want more content, more community, more events, and just more all around, please check out our Patreon.
We have 3 membership tiers that you can join. The Valkyries, which includes access to our Boppin' Discord, live Q&As from Lexi and I, book club, exclusive author interviews, community events, promo codes for live events, plus 20% off discounted merch. That is all for $5 a month. Or you can join the High Fae, which includes everything from the Valkyrie level, plus early access to ad-free episodes, our full episode outlines, and special voting privileges. That is $10 a month. And last but not least, we have our Inner Circle, which includes everything from the previous 2 tiers, plus more behind-the-scenes content, a welcome gift from Lexi and I, giveaways, a private Discord channel that Lexi and I are really, really active in, and your name is shouted out on the podcast. That is $25 a month.
Join the party at patreon.com/fantasyfangirls. The link is also in the show notes, and really and truly, thank you so much for supporting us as we've turned this podcast into our livelihood. It's all because of you.
And now it is time to train with Cassian and Asriel in a very PG setting, Nesta.
Unfortunately. To kick off every episode, Nicole does us the honor of summarizing what happens in this stretch of chapters. So gather round, friends. We need an Inner Circle Debrief for Silver Flames, chapters 20 through 28.
Chapter 20. Arriving at the river house, we get an Inner Circle plus Nesta debrief from Asriel. It turns out that through Asriel's sleuthing, cough, cough, torture, cough, he learned that Brialyn is wanting to find the Cauldron. Why? Because that bubbling bitch stole her youth and she wants it back. But how will she find the hidden Cauldron on Cretea? By wielding something called the Dread Trove. 3 deadly objects that were created by the Cauldron, lost to time, and were the sole source of Lexi and I's headaches all this week. So the plan is simple. Get the Dread Trove before Brialyn and Kosjay. Who's gonna track down these not wanting to be found objects though? Not Nesta, but Elaine raises her hand. Chapter 21. Nesta shoves that hand right back down. Elaine, have you forgotten what happened the last time we fucked with the Bubble Tubble Toil in Trouble? Nesta instead turns to her youngest sister Feyre and asks why she can't find the trove. Woof. But surprise, Feyre's preggo and can't. After hoops and hollers of joy from the soon-to-be uncles, Nesta taps into the auntie bravery and agrees to search for the trove. Out in the hall, Feyre reaches out her own hand and tells Nesta that she's having a baby boy before anyone else knows. Get ready to learn about PPTPs, Feyre! Chapter 22. Asriel and Cassian have a chit-chat in their Burka loungers, including talking about if either of them would ever want children. This leads Cassian to start thinking about the act that leads to children, and he tells that blue siphon chaperone to turn a blind eye. Entering Nesta's room, Cassian is ready to settle the score, and oral bang, orally bang. I said it. That's not the last time I'll be singing this song this episode. Bang! Nesta's ready for that dick, though. However, Cassian promptly leaves. It's just sex, right? Chapter 23. The next morning, Nesta approaches the training ring as if nothing ever happened. Could be this new game that has begun, or it could be because Asriel, bucket of cold water, is also here. But that cold water quickly washes away because Cassian and Asriel begin to spar, causing Nesta to wonder what it would be like to go to the Eiffel Tower with them sexually. Filthy thoughts leaving her mind, Nesta asks Gwen about the Dread Trove, directly disobeying the whole, hey, don't tell people about this rule. And while Gwen agrees to help look for any books pertaining to the Trove, Gwen also turns down Nesta's offer to join training. Chapter 24. 5 days later, Cassian is summoned to the library because so dedicated to her exercises. Nesta has been practicing in the stacks for days, much to Clotho's chagrin. Cassian notices that Nesta's form is off and corrects her, but oh-ho! Nesta is being sneaky because she used this opportunity to show the priestesses in the library that not only is Cassian very safe to train with, but this is also an opportunity to never feel weak again. However, sadly, despite her chess playing, the sign-up sheet remains blank. Later that night, a book is laid out for Nesta. Sadly, not smut, but a war strategy book from Cassian. Nesta cannot put this book down, fascinated by all the nuances of going to war. The next morning, Nesta checks the sign-up sheet, and there's a name written in big, bold letters. Gwen! Chapter 25. The next morning, Gwen joins Nesta and Cassian for training, and it turns out the quarter nymph is very nimble on her feet. Later that day, Nesta visits Emery's shop, but there's already someone here. Bellius, who is her ass of a cousin, is only here to bully Emery into giving his family her store. But Emery, being the boss bitch that she is, with some backup from Nesta, gets the asshole out. The two females share lunch together and talk of traveling. When Nesta invites Emery to come and join her and Gwen at training, she turns down the offer, which causes Nesta to call her a coward. Some thoughts are inside thoughts, Nesta. Meanwhile, Cassian is meeting with Eris about the Trove, and while Eris has never heard of the Trove, that doesn't stop this ally from getting at least one dig into Cassian. Chapter 26. Back at the House of Wind, in the dining room, a brooding Cassian informs Nesta of his meeting with Eris. Nesta, taking matters into her own hands and mouth, gives Cassian the much-needed distraction, and the dining room scenes of all dining room scenes begins. Bang, bang, orally bang. I said, his dick is enormous. Bang! But post Cassian unleashing himself, there's a scuff in the hallway. Bucket of cold water. Asriel makes himself known, and Nesta rushes out of the dining room, leaving poor Asriel to eat dinner at that table. Chapter 27. The next day at training, there is still no info on the Trove from Gwen, but Nesta is determined to exhaust any other resource other than scrying. Later, Cassian arrives at Windhaven, bringing a very specific gift to Emery, a bribery of spices from Nesta with instructions that she can thank her for the salt, cumin, pepper, etc. by coming to training. Looks like your wish was granted, Nesta Archeron, because the next morning, Emery joins the training party. Chapter 28. The first training of the fearsome threesome, not in the way Nesta was thinking of threesomes earlier, is underway. And where Gwen is nimble and lithe on her feet, Emery is awkward and off balance, which causes Cassian to wonder how her wings were clipped. The hour is up though, and the Reese Uber is here to winnow Emery back to Windhaven. But something catches Reese's eye. Nesta and Cassian are standing so close together, and this house reeks of sex. So Reese, taking a leaf out of his nosy mate's pages, asks to speak to Nesta mind to mind and tells her that she must treat Gwen with respect, causing Nesta to kick him out.
All my life, my hair has felt like a constant frizzy battle. Is it moistured enough? Am I using the right products to make sure it's healthy? How can I make it look the best by styling it the least? Especially for us here in Colorado with super dry air that, yes, does indeed impact our hair. The fact is, even if we're not aware of environmental changes in our day-to-day, our hair sure is, and that's why I recommend Prose.
Prose makes beauty personal with truly custom formulas that couldn't exist without you. Each and every bottle is made to order order. It even has your name on the bottle. It's so cute. Based on an in-depth consultation that covers everything from your beauty goals to the weather to the water where you live. From millions of possible formulas, only one is uniquely yours. And Prose only uses naturally powerful and proven effective ingredients, selecting from over 185 clean ingredients to target your specific concerns and goals.
Since I switched to Prose, I've noticed that my hair is silkier and way less frizzy. It's easier to style. The color stays in well. They even has our hairstylist commenting about it. She loves it too.
Prose is so confident that you'll love your results that they're offering our listeners an exclusive trial offer. Get 50% off your first hair care subscription order at prose.com/fantasyfangirls. That's prose.com/fantasyfangirls for your free consultation and 50% off your custom routine. Prose.com/fantasyfangirls.
It is time to step into the cauldron and discuss key insights, character analysis, lore, foreshadowing theories, and oh, so much more. It's the next day after Cassian and Nesta's jizz in my pants moment, and Reese has requested both of their presence at the River House to discuss what Azriel discovered about Briellen. In other words, if Nesta has to get involved in this, that means it is not good news. This is Nesta's first time returning to Valaris after the fateful ultimatum 2 weeks ago. It's been 2 weeks of being at the House of Wind high above the city, excluding, a few uncomfortable trips to Windhaven. And in that time, she's gotten used to the quiet of the house and the library, which remember how not long ago, she couldn't stand the quiet. That was when the roaring in her head became loudest. She distracted herself back then with music, taverns, drinking, and questionable company. To avoid that quiet, she now finds comforting, familiar, and welcoming. Understandably, being at the River House is a little nerve-wracking for Nesta. Her stomach is queasy as she anticipates the judgment from the Inner Circle, especially on the heels of her fight with Elaine. And she steels herself, ensuring her walls are up as she heads into the same study where she was given that ultimatum. Which, Feyre's gaze is wary and cold as Nesta enters, until Cassian approaches Feyre, and that's when she smiles. As much as Nesta creates a lot of negativity out of nothing, the tension between these two sisters is absolutely there. Speaking of tension, it's there with Amren too. It pains me how Nesta wants to smile at Amren's ferociousness at Cassian, showing how alike these two truly are, but instead these former friends have a staring contest. Again, showing just how alike they are, as neither is willing to break the stare down first. With Nesta's presence here and what the Inner Circle is about to ask her, we have to remember that Feyre has already asked Elaine to help. Yes, I believe that they hope Nesta will help track down the Dread Trove. That's why she's here at this meeting, but they already have Plan B as they anticipate her refusal. Nesta herself is not welcome in this meeting. Nesta Cauldron Maid is what's requested here. And hey, I get it. Have we mentioned Nesta has pushed everyone away on purpose yet, and then gets pissed when it actually works?
We've got quite the download to go through from Azriel regarding his Briellen update after watching her for a week. Azriel learned, and by learned, I mean tortured it out of many, many people, that the other queens have fled Briellen weeks ago. But Briellen sits now on the 6 queens' shared throne at, I'm going to call it headquarters, and she's now gathering her armies together. It is true that Baron has already pledged his forces to her cause. But now we get to learn what exactly that cause is. She wants to find the cauldron to restore her youth that it took from her in its anger at Nesta taking some of its power away. Remember, the cauldron is now with Miriam and Draken on the very hidden Cretea, and no one knows where the cauldron is outside of the Inner Circle. Plus, there's wards and spells on the island of Cretea, so theoretically, it's hopeless for her to ever even find it. And she knows that it's too well hidden for her to figure out its location.
Nesta and Elaine may have the power to track the cauldron, as we learned in ACOWAR, but Briellen does not have that same great power. This is because the cauldron couldn't give Briellen the ability to track the cauldron after Nesta took too much from the cauldron. So instead, all Briellen can do is track anything the cauldron made. Like the Dread Trove. She can then use the potency of the Trove's combined made essence to track down the cauldron itself.
Not to mention, the Death Lord Kosje has been the one whispering in her ear about the Dread Trove and how that can help her find the cauldron. Feyre brings up a really good point, though, that we have to talk about. Hey, we were looking for the cauldron recently. Why didn't we just go after the Dread Trove? Because, Feyre darling, the Bob was easier to find. And Amren honestly assumed the Trove was at the bottom of the sea for the last 10,000 years. Again, another bottom of the sea reference. I guarantee you we're going under the sea in a future ACOTAR book. But I don't know, SJM, because this sounds like a cover my ass so people don't see this as a plot hole from the OG trilogy move.
So technically, our crew was looking for the Book of Breathings to nullify the Cauldron, so Hybern couldn't find it, because the Bone Carver did confirm that the King of Hybern had the Cauldron in his possession. But yes, the Trove would have been very useful up against the King of Hybern. However, 3 long-lost items to find versus 2 halves where they already knew who to talk to retrieve both. I get it. I get why that's a lot easier than trying to find the Dread Trove.
A little bit of a Cauldron boil me moment, but yes, I do agree. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, what the heck is this Dread Trove? The Dread Trove is today's Suriel topic, and don't worry, before you freak out, part 2 is going to be in Maasverse Madness. We're going to keep this part specifically on how it applies to the story, and we're going to go into more the nuances, the ins and outs, the magic later on in the Suriel. And by we, I mean Lexi. Dread Trove is a collection of objects made with a capital M from the Cauldron by the Daglin during a time where wild magic roamed the earth.
While there were originally more of these made objects, legend now claims only 3 Dread Trove objects exist. The mask, which can raise the dead and command them to march at your will, the harp, which can open any door, physical or otherwise, and the crown, which can control anyone, no matter how mighty their mental shield is, although you do have to be physically close to the crown to be influenced.
Through what Amryn says is 10,000 years, but it's 15,000 years, these objects have faded from memory, perhaps even on purpose, as the sentient objects themselves do not want to be found. They place a glamour over all of humanity's minds, helping. I love how the crown, you have to be very close, but this is like, let's put a glamour over everybody. This glamour is what makes everyone forget that the Dread Trove was ever even a thing.
How very convenient!
Convenience a word for it. I think this is unnecessarily confusing, but that's just me. Until now, of course, the glamour has lifted on very certain people. Now, whether that's from the sentient Trove wanting to be known at last, or how fate played out with newly made people who were removed from the glamour. But there's a small problem. These items are super hard to find, even if you now know about them.
According to Reese, emphasis on that part there, those who possessed the Dread Trove grew careless and lost the objects in ancient wars or to treachery or simply because they were misplaced or forgotten. So no one knows where the Trove objects are, although they were last known to be in Prythian.
But we cannot forget about Kostj's part in all of this, because he is working with Brialyn to retrieve the Dread Trove. She is the one capable of fetching these items while he is confined to his lake. Remember, Kostj's number one goal is to free himself from this lake. And while no one knows the full scope of the Trove's powers, one can easily assume that the United Trove will be able to free him from this lake and potentially unleash great power that basically anyone can't even fathom. But even Brialyn having the Trove, let alone Kostj, would be bad, because with the Trove, you wouldn't only be able to use the combined made essence to track down the Cauldron. You'll also be able to raise the dead, control the minds of an army, break through any wards, and move through time and space.
Even just being in possession of one Trove object can give the humans the biggest advantage over the Fae in this brewing war, now that the wall is gone and people want to claim more territories for themselves, emphasizing just how powerful and dangerous each of these objects are, especially if they fall into the wrong hands. But our crew has one thing going for them. Nesta and Elaine are made from the Cauldron and therefore also have the ability to track the Cauldron-made Trove objects thanks to the power they received from the Cauldron. Never forget, like calls to like, which, by the way, 2 more like calls to like, bringing the series total to 9. During this conversation about the Trove and the Cauldron, Feyre pointedly turns to Nesta and asks her what happened in the Cauldron. She's inquiring from a place of needing as much information as they can get about the powers they're working with and the abilities to track and connect with these powers. However, it is a very triggering question for Nesta, as being forced into the Cauldron was the most traumatic experience of her life. Feyre knows this, and while she asks softly, the stakes are too high to not ask for more information about something that can give them even the slightest upper hand in knowledge.
This reminds me back in ACOSF, when Feyre told Nesta to join them at the High Lord's meeting. It was not asked, it was just assumed, basically. Feyre sometimes is so focused on the mission and the goal at hand that she quite frankly forgets how others might react, especially people as close to her as her sisters. Which normally, this type of telling Nesta or asking these types of questions to Nesta would be met with a very stern no or shutting it down. But Nesta instead remains quiet. She's taken off guard by the direction of the conversation. Cassian, sweet Cassian, attempts to change the direction, asking if it really even matters, taking the stares off of Nesta, again, really showing just how much he understands her. But Nesta does speak up. After breathing through her fear and the images that pelt her, she says, quote, "I wasn't aware of what I took, just that I was taking things the Cauldron did not want me to have. It seemed fitting, given what it was doing to me." Okay, huge applause for Nesta all around. Yay! She is in the room filled with people who, for the majority, are not high on her list right now.
And who she knows she isn't high on their list either.
But she is opening up and being vulnerable, even if it's just 3 sentences. It's still such a huge move in the right direction for her. Even Feyre looks at her with something shining in her eyes. And I like to assume that that's pride or excitement for this new version of Nesta who is coming to the surface. Feyre is seeing what Elaine didn't last episode. Elaine basically stormed out of the library saying she's not getting any better. She's not getting any better. This is Nesta indeed getting better. And I'm so glad that people are seeing it. And Cassian, happier than anyone, gives her a soft smile. Yet Nesta looks at this like she's done something so tiny. And yet everyone around her is now suddenly thinking she's super worthy.
Because Nesta is so conditioned in her negative self-talk, she immediately jumps to the conclusion that she's done so many unworthy things that the small bit she offered up is such a big deal. I mean, she's not wrong. And this goes to show how ingrained her self-loathing is. That as soon as she does something good, contributes in a way that she can, the response reflects all the terrible things she's done instead, where she holds on to the negativity versus the positivity here.
We readers know that the small amount of words from Nesta is anything but tiny. This is her coming back into her own courage, taking down her own inner walls. It is so much bigger than just 3 sentences. So, with all of this download, the plan is simple. The Inner Circle has to track down the Dread Trove before Briellen does.
Little does our crew know that Briellen already has the crown and is starting to control people like Eris's soldiers who went to the continent with Baron. While we know that made people from the Cauldron can track these made objects, Cassian's question momentarily lingers in the air. How are we going to track the Dread Trove? And that is where Elaine steps in, literally as she steps into the room and volunteers that they'll use her to track down the Dread Trove. Interesting that Feyre's expression goes white, despite her being the one to initially ask Elaine to help do this. I suppose it's because she didn't expect things to go down quite like this with Nesta right here. I don't know. Anyway, unsurprisingly, Nesta immediately pushes back with no.
Nesta is right away falling back into her role as Elaine's protector. It's like that inane instinct is just so ingrained in her.
She's terrified of what happened from the last time she tapped into their connection with the Cauldron. Then the Inner Circle needed to track down the Cauldron to find Hybern's army. And when Nesta scried and found the Cauldron, which led to the Cauldron stealing Elaine as retribution against Nesta, who stole power from the Cauldron. Nesta is scared of bringing about similar consequences and refuses to make the same mistake again. She recognizes that they don't fully comprehend the powers that they're awakening by attempting to track down these made objects. And despite distancing herself from her favorite sister this past year and purposefully hurting her with insults, Nesta can't imagine putting Elaine in harm's way and risking her life again. She already carries so much guilt for putting Elaine in danger last time, and then even more guilt that she wasn't the one who saved Elaine. This is one more trigger of her deep shame, failure, and self-loathing.
Nesta will do anything to help her middle sister, Elaine. As she'll note later, when they were in poverty, she would have gone as far as selling her own body on the streets to ensure that Elaine was fed. So this idea of Elaine going after Cauldron-made objects? No fucking way.
I love how Elaine sticks up for herself and throws Nesta's insult from the other day back in her face, making a really damn good point and even making Nesta flinch. Quote, "Shall I tend to my little garden forever? You can't have it both ways. You cannot resent my decision to lead a small, quiet life while also refusing to let me do anything greater." Go, Elaine! That is one of those lines that really sticks with me from this series.
Exactly. Elaine has finally started spreading her wings and she enjoys the feeling of not being cuddled anymore. Something Feyre has noticed within her middle sister, telling Nesta that it is Elaine's choice what she wants to do. But remember last episode when Nesta had a really bad moment with Elaine in the library because she believes that it's now the Feyre and Elaine show? Yeah, so Feyre defending her really makes it seem that way even more to Nesta. Like Feyre understands this version of Elaine more. But Elaine leans into that insecurity of Nesta's, pointing out how the last time they fucked with the Cauldron, it was Feyre who saved her. Subtext, you, Nesta, did nothing. Again, which leads Nesta to lashing out. Quote, look who decided to grow claws after all. Maybe you'll become interesting at last, Elaine.
Oh, dear.
Ooh, ouch. Is this an L? I think this is deserving of an L.
This is an L for sure. Again, whenever Nesta's with the Inner Circle, she pretty much gets an L.
She just lives as an L. L's aside, this is also a very sisterly moment. And look, many of us who are siblings, we know what it's like to fight with each other. It can look a lot like this. Lexi, your and I's fights when we were younger weren't that dissimilar to this.
Oh, they were rough. Yes.
They were rough. Like that was also just siblings, right? These two know each other so well. And while right now the fight is really centered on Nesta and Elaine, they know how to strike each other in the heart instantly. Elaine in the Nesta, you didn't do anything when we were in poverty, when I was taken by the Cauldron, And Nesta strikes back with, Elaine, you have no personality, which sounds a lot like some of the fandom in ACOTAR. Woof. But we get the iconic line from Elaine, quote, I went into the Cauldron too, you know, and it captured me. And yet somehow all you think of is what my trauma did to you. I am really proud of Elaine here. She is tired of people babying her. She is tired of being fought over and protected when she's gone through horrors too. Horrors that she herself has overcome. And in here, she's getting no credit for it. And she's saying, let me grow, damn it.
It's scenes like this that we get from Elaine that I can't wait to get her POV. I think we are all going to be blown away by her self-awareness, growth, and inner strength. And I'm so excited for it and can't wait to celebrate the middle Archer and sister more.
Despite what Elaine says, Nesta is still desperate to protect her, which L, Nesta, L, because listen to your sister.
Yeah, Reese's office is becoming like the Nesta L room. It's just every time she's with the Inner Circle here, it's bad. Unlike the dining room, which we have to dub the Cassian O room.
Oh my God.
Get it?
Moving on. She turns to Feyre. Oh God, okay. Saying, Feyre, you have all that magic. You were made too. You were made enough to wield Bob. Why can't you do it? Just for a second. This is a bad look. I definitely agree. Nesta is again showing her favorite within her sisters, and she hates how she showed that preference so bluntly. And yet, I do understand why she went to this conclusion in the first place. Feyre hunted. Feyre went over the wall to Prithian. Feyre saved everybody under the mountain. Feyre faced the Ouroboros mirror. Feyre has all these powers. And that's just 5 examples. That's not even close to her list of accomplishments. And not to side with Nesta, because the meaning behind this is not great. I am going to point that out very bluntly. But Feyre's resume is much more suited for this than Elaine.
Quick break from the sisterly squabble. Nesta has been working to improve her strength, stamina, and overall health. And today's sponsor, Lumen, would actually be really helpful to her as she goes through this training. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workouts, sleep, and even stress management.
All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fat or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on with your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep on top of your health game.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and better sleep.
So if you want to take that next step in improving your health, much like Nesta, go to lumen.me/FFG to get 15% off your Lumen. That is LUMEN.me/FFG for 15% off your purchase. Thank you so much, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode.
Well, this is as good a time as any for Feyre and Reese to drop some big news of their own. Feyre's pregnant! Huzzah!
I love the moment where Rhys is like, we honestly thought you all would guess at this point. Like, that is such a family moment for him to say.
And I love how Cassian is the first to let out a whoop. It's so in character how openly enthusiastic and happy he is. And then for Amren to have like light dancing in her eyes as she says, congratulations. No wonder Rhys has been an extra broody bastard. And that's why Farah has constantly had this impenetrable shield around her. And we see why when Rhys momentarily drops the shield and her scent includes a smaller, softer scent, quote, like a budding rose. Oh, how sweet. Turns out the shield is a compromise between the mates because Rhys has been quite overprotective of his mate and unborn child. He initially insisted on never leaving her side for 10 months.
With this shield in place for so long, we have to address the character decision behind Rhys doing this because yeah, this feels very overbearing for him to do. Rhys is a person who sent Feyre to the Weaver. And even after Feyre came back from the Suriel's death, he was like, you're your own person. Maybe just leave a note next time. This feels very much unlike the Rhys who protected Feyre, but also let her be that own person. The way I take this character decision, because honestly, in my mind, I am determined to make it make sense for my beloved Rhysand, was SJM's way of getting around the scent change for Feyre. And because she is carrying their child, he is going to be that extra protective that they mention. As Cassian will say later, Rhys right now is in a very primal male mode and will attack anything or anyone who presents a threat to Feyre. But yes, this shield does feel very overbearing for Rhys, which typically we don't associate with him.
Yeah, the way I see it is, you know how women get really hormonal when we're pregnant? It's a scientific fact, and I speak from experience, that we can get a little moody, crazy, overly emotional, pick your word for pregnancy, making your hormones go out of whack. So I think of this as being along the same lines for the primal Fae male mates. Their hormones are also going a little crazy in full-blown protective mode of their pregnant mate, especially when you take into account how rare pregnancy is for the Fae. Speaking of which, since Farah is 2 months pregnant, that means she became pregnant 7 months after they began trying, which for Fae isn't very long. And I know some of the fandom has qualms with that, but I'm here to say good for Rhys and Farah. And if you really need a reason, I'd like to chalk it up to fate being on their side, as I discussed during Frost and Starlight. Farah being pregnant takes her off the board of putting her in danger, like she previously would have done without a second thought. First of all, for all the reasons we were just talking about, Fae pregnancies are rare and they want to protect the mother and child's well-being at all costs. They also don't want potential enemies knowing about this pregnancy yet, since it could make them a very vulnerable target. And her being pregnant is wading into unmarked territory, not even taking into account what we'll learn about the baby's Illyrian wings. Given Farah's unusual set of gifts, they're not sure how doing magic will impact the baby. Winnowing is fine, but wielding other powers like those from the other High Lords could dangerously strain her body. So they're taking no chances and staying as safe as possible with this pregnancy, both literally in keeping Farah out of harm's way and not accidentally causing any unnecessary strain to her body.
Well, and also don't forget that if she dies, who else dies as well, other than Nyx, the future baby. So I do think a little bit of this is also, hey, we do have to be extra careful because it's a 1-2 shot if one of us is in harm. Nesta has been notably quiet since this announcement was made. And it's not because she's not happy for her sister. Instead, it's because she just saw a true family react to such happy news. I want to be really clear because Nesta has never been around a family that has had such a reaction to happy news. They're tackling each other. They're jumping up and down. They're kissing each other's cheeks. And she feels like she's looking through a window again, much like how she felt on winter solstice last year, which is why when Feyre tells Nesta that it's a boy, before she shares the info with anyone else, it means the world to Nesta. She's finally being let into the room rather than staring through the window.
But even when Farah is extending that kindness and letting Nesta in, at first Nesta is combative. She's turning everything Farah says into an insult at her, like how having sisters was so horrible for her sister, so that must be why she's excited for a boy. This is Nesta's default, especially with Farah, who she has had a lot of tension and baggage with. And I feel for Farah in her exasperation. It's like, I'm trying to be nice here. Stop trying to start a fight. When Farah doesn't take the bait and sticks to metaphorically holding out her hand, Nesta literally doesn't have an answer to that.
And something shifts in Nesta upon hearing this news. It makes her say that she will be the one who searches for the Dread Trove. It makes her step up in that way. It really feels like when others in your life make huge life moves, it forces you to pause and take a look around in your own life. Here, Nesta is thinking, do I want to be in a world where there will be a child in? And it makes me think about when I became an aunt for the first time. I know it changed my way of thinking, and it really leaned me more into future mode, especially knowing that there are going to be 2 little Lexis running around, and they're just so cute, and I love them so much. And Nesta doesn't want her nephew to grow up in a world where war is brewing, and she could have stopped it.
Back at the House of Wind, Cassian and Azriel are having a quick chat. And I just need to point out once again how well Cassian understands Nesta. He knows that she will come to her own conclusion to Scry when she's ready to take that step. Order her to do it and she'll refuse. Yep, Nesta is definitely a rebel from Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies. It's okay, Nesta, so is my husband. I love you all, as bullheaded as you can be. Side note, it will be interesting how Nesta brings Gwen into the hunt for more information about the Dread Trove. I understand she is using her new resources the best she can with an expert researcher and library, but at the same time, she is handing this mighty responsibility onto someone else in a non-dangerous way, like it would be with Elaine. Like Cassian notes, she needs to exhaust her other options before trying scrying again. I don't know. If I was in the Inner Circle, I wouldn't be super confident in this other option either, because it's looking for lost knowledge that has been purposefully forgotten. And they have Nesta right here. I really do get why Nesta does this, but I still had to point it out. As the 2 Bat Boys celebrate the fact that they're going to be uncles, which the conversation turns to whether each of them want children. And when Azriel asks Cassian, his mind immediately goes to Nesta. Now, not in the lovey-dovey of picturing their future with children kind of way, but he can't stop thinking about their intimacy and how she now has the upper hand after making him jizz in his pants last night. Don't worry, Cass, you still have 1 more point than her in our count. With a completely not subtle, turn a blind eye chaperone comment to Azriel, Cassian goes to find Nesta. And find her he does, nestled in bed with a romance book and her hair down. He's here to settle a debt, refusing to let her have this upper hand. He thinks that it's out of male pride, but come on, I'll even say, including Cassian, know better. He wants her bad, and he's enjoying this game they're caught up in. They match each other's fire in every which way, and I actually love how their intimacy isn't supposedly romantic at first. That's not really either of their characters, or especially where they are in their journeys. They build several different kinds of relationships before ultimately embracing being mates. And this sexual relationship, it's playful, it's sexy, it's primal, it's competitive as they're pulled toward each other. Yes, it's because they're meant to be, but Nesta could never jump to that conclusion at this point. So instead, they're dancing around it in the safe zone and keeping it surface level when, in actuality, it's anything but.
I think it is so notable that Cassian says, my friends have nothing to do with this. After a scene that was so Inner Circle equals family focused, and from what we experienced from Mist and Fury till now, Cassian has been directly associated with that family element of the Inner Circle. But this is him saying to Nesta, you and me, we are separate from them, which Nesta really needed. She has bad ties with the Inner Circle now. And I really want listeners, and myself included, to take ourselves out of feeling like we're a part of the family from the Inner Circle from the first 3 books, right? This is Cassian telling her that I'm not forcing you to enter this feeling, this family. This is you and me. Oh.
He's both here to let her know he is very, very interested, and he is here to follow her lead. He'll never do anything she doesn't want to, and he makes sure she is in control of this arrangement. He's also reassuring her that he never said what she assumed he thought last night. Remember that the reason she hurt him with the quick off the mark comment was because she thought he regretted what happened between them. And here he is like, no, get that out of your head. I never said that. So Nesta, super turned on by him and wanting this just as badly, lays out the ground rules. Number 1, this stays out of training and everything else. And number 2, this is only sex. Notably, something shifts in Cassian's expression at that. Remember, he came to her room after Az literally asked him if he wants children. This is so much more than just sex with Nesta, and deep down, he knows it. Also, we saw very similar words exchanged between Rhys and Farah at the one-bedroom inn. Don't worry, Cass, you'll get your happily ever after, I promise.
And with the rules laid out and deep purring sounds vibrating from Cassian's chest, it begins! As we ramp up the sex talk in the coverage of this book, we have to ask ourselves, is this oral sex scene working in tandem with the plot, or is it sex for sex's sake? And I think this is absolutely sex working with the plot.
Yes, definitely. I think the first half of all the sex scenes will be working with the plot, and most of the second half will not be.
This is the start of Nesta getting to have a different relationship with sex. It is not numbing out or a desperate escape. Instead, it's the almost opposite here. It's feeling alive. It's not as carnal or blacked out. It's worshiping. It's fun. It's gamified. It's to make the other feel good, rather than wanting selfishly to get out of her own head. But at first, she really does start wanting to go towards his pee-pee, wanting to fall right into sex right away. And he's like, no, ma'am, this is about you. This is us evening the playing field, which is when he gets on his knees and he kneels before her, the SJM men in their knees. This is also her getting to experience a not so gentle gentleman, Cassian, who is wholly focused on her in this scene. Evening the playing field, yes, but he wants her to feel just as good as he did last night. Yes, sir. After Nesta has erupted, she thinks, quote, she couldn't move, couldn't remember how to move. No one had ever done that to her, made her feel like that. I like to think this is almost subtext that she's never had a lover who cared about her pleasure this much. Also, this is the first time we are getting to see sex on the page between two mates who have not accepted the mating bond yet. So it makes sense that Nesta's like, that was great. That was awesome. That was the best I've ever had.
I also loved the wording, quote, like the world could be remade in the force of what had erupted from her. That's Cauldron talk right there. Just a nice little nod to her connection to it. Even though he wants to stay and ride her till they are both screaming, Cassian makes himself leave the room. I love that only pure will and pride make him back off when she reaches for him. He's not denying her because he doesn't want it or is afraid of getting hurt. It goes right back to this game that they're playing, and he wants this night's focus to be solely on her, like last night was on him, and everything that Nicole was also just saying. Cassian 11, Nesta 9. I know our previous rules where you get a point for every orgasm, but if Nesta got a point for last night, it's only fair for Cassian to get this point.
So correct me if I'm wrong. That's 1 point in Cassian's favor, yes?
Yes. And then last night, Nesta got a point in her favor. Yes.
The next morning, you never think that something happened between these two, because as Nesta comes up the stairs, there's not a hint of a blush or even as much as a sparkle in her eye. So their game hits a new level. Not only seeing which one of them can win each round, but now it's which one of them can pretend like nothing had happened the longest, which pause. I cannot help but think about when you're dating, or at least when I was dating in my 20s, playing the who can care less game. It's like holding out on a text with each other, or like trying not to care, like pretending like you're not falling for the person, which I hated this game. I really hated playing games, but I was the queen of it in my 20s. And here's why. I'm terrified of flirting. It scares me so bad. I get like Brett makes fun of me for how because he's derpy and dorky, but he was the flirter when we first started dating. But I love the idea of pretending not to notice someone to avoid flirting. That I could do.
It's so funny because that is what drew Jake and I to each other, is that we were not playing games with one another. And in fact, the girl who had introduced us to one another, she told me, she's like, if you keep hanging out with him this much, he's going to think you really like him. She was like telling me, you have to play the game better. And I was like, I do like him. Like, that's the point. I see this not just as a game, but as Cassian holding to their agreement that this stays out of training. And it's them kind of playing chicken to see who's going to break that rule first.
But the who can care less game is not quite what's on Nesta's mind. She's worried that Cassian has scratched his itch and now he's done with her.
Again, she's reverting back to that worst assumption to feed the narrative that she's not wanted, not worthy, because she doesn't think she should be. But these two aren't the only ones in the training ring today. Azriel the chaperone is here. Which, by the way, I love that Cassian is like, oh my God, how does Az know something happened? Is it our sense on each other? It's like, you silly goose. You basically told him you were off to her room last night. Anyway, apparently Azriel has been doing his exercises at night, which leaves Cassian curious, but he knows better than to push.
Which, quick side note, because in chapter 29, Cassian notes how Elaine goes to bed early with the excuse of helping a fairy with her garden in the morning. But he suspects that what she's saying is not true. So based on the bonus chapter with Azriel and Elaine, it does not seem like they've been sneaking away at night to be with each other or anything. But it is really odd that both of them are possibly doing mystery things at night / in the early hours of the morning. What are they up to?
But like separately, because they're obviously not like together, as we saw from the bonus chapter.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was definitely a new thing between the two of them.
Yeah. I mean, he literally put a necklace on her and got hard. So like he's not hanging out with her very much, I don't think.
But Azriel's here this morning, and I have to wonder if it's because he wants to see for himself how Nesta's training is going and what the dynamic is between her and Cassian. Maybe he also feels drawn to spending time with his brother and being around the family after learning that there's going to be a new addition. The main reason Azriel is here right now, though, so we can see these bat boys spar in all their glory.
Quote, Cassian's breathing became labored. Though Cassian had more bulk, Azriel was quick as hell. They were evenly matched. So circling each other, Cassian gets an idea. Feigning a look at Nesta, Azriel immediately takes the bait, which causes his move to be blocked by Cassian. The sparring begins, the kicks, the punches, the fists, the feet, the wings, all of it. And finally, after so long, Cassian knows that they need to get on with their lesson. They're like, we could do this for hours at this point. So whoever lands the next punch wins. I love that Azriel's like, no, what the fuck? From Cassian's inner monologue, quote, Az had a vicious competitive streak. It wasn't boastful and arrogant, the way Cassian knew he himself was prone to be, or possessive and terrifying like Amren's. No, it was quiet and cruel and utterly lethal. This is why he wins every game they play. I love it. But also, Azriel is cunning because he does the same feigning a look towards Nesta, except for he does it quick and alarmed, causing Cassian's mated heart to leap into his chest and get punched in the face. Who else get punched in the face, though? Nesta, with dirty, dirty thoughts. Because as these two were fighting, Nesta's mind went elsewhere, wondering what it would be like to have those two Illyrian males worshipping her body in bed, Azriel slamming into her from behind, Cassian pumping into her mouth. The Eiffel Tower is among us. We should note, though, this was originally a scene in this book, not a fantasy. A actual threesome scene.
Yes, you heard that right. SJM actually wrote a threesome scene between Cassian, Nesta, and Azriel in Silver Flames, but her editor made her take it out. And I'm sorry, I could not find the interview source for this. So please do take this revelation with a grain of salt, because we always do like to cite our sources. I couldn't find it, but the internet has said it. And so I'm going to go with that, because that is quite a statement.
There's also this moment when they're done sparring that Cassian notes her throat bobs as she looks between these two fighters. And Azriel, quote, let out a cough and walked towards the water station. Azriel's like, ma'am, stop it. No. Pause. I have to say, I am feral for this Cassian and Azriel sparring scene. It sounds like they worked up quite an appetite, and they need to quench that hunger with Factor. Power through your busy days with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Factor has easy, nutritious options to keep you fueled and feeling your best. Whether you like routine or you enjoy mixing things up, Factor has you covered with 35 different delicious meals every week and over 60 additional convenience options you can add to your box, like keto cookies, pressed juices, and smoothies. Don't let the shorter days slow you down. Stay energized with America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service.
Factor lets you do you. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Because Factor's meals are chef prepared and dietitian approved, you're going to love not only how Factor's meals taste, but also how they support your goals. And check this out. Factor is cheaper than takeout and dining out. I absolutely know that for a fact. Put the money you save toward holiday shopping or reaching your financial goals.
Stay on your A game with quality ingredients you can trust and quality you can taste in every one of Factor's fresh, never frozen meals. Use your time more effectively. So important during these darker months as we get into daylight savings. Let Factor take shopping, prepping, cooking, and cleanup off your daily list of things to do.
Head to factormeals.com/fantasyfangirl50 and use code fantasyfangirl50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code fantasyfangirl50 at factormeals.com/fantasyfangirl50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active.
That night, Nesta is on the stairs trying to clear her head after a failed attempt of inviting Gwen to training. Slowly, the stairs have turned into Nesta's meditation of sorts. The goal has completely shifted from her needing to escape the house, get to the bottom of the stairs, and now it is taking the stairs as a way to escape the loudness of her head. The goal is not to get to the bottom, the goal is to clear her head, which is a huge win, making it to step 2000. Her head is finally wholly clear and she gets an idea. But before we get into that idea, Stair Math Watch is back. And yet again, I'm adjusting my Pythagorean theorem.
I can't believe you're still doing this.
I'm doing it until the end of this podcast of this book. I hope you know that.
You're going to have to go back through and correct your answers, or as a fandom, we'll have to grade your total.
Oh, God, that's
Some
terrifying.
of you who are better at math have been very nice about reaching out to us and being like, Nicole?
The stairs are noted as a foot high, which last episode I incorrectly noted they were a foot in depth.
I would just like to point out that I agreed with the stairs in height, and Nicole said, no, that's not right.
Drag me under the bus on it. So instead, I'm just going to say they're both a foot high and a foot in depth. So back to algebra we go. If both A and B in our equation are 12 inches, then C, meaning the slope of the stairs, is 16.97 inches. Final answer! So here, Nesta makes it to step 2,000, aka 33,940 inches, or 0.54 miles one way. Woof. And since some of you are like, hey, we're metric people, can you please say it? This is for our metric friendly friends. 0.87 kilometers one way. There you go. For reference, the Empire State Building in New York City is 1,576 steps from the ground floor to the 86th floor of the observation deck. So the full 10,000 steps is like climbing down the Empire State Building 6.35 times, again, one way.
May I please put in a request for you to just do those comparisons, because that's a lot more relatable.
Okay, so then in that same vein, Nesta makes it to step 2,000. So this is like going another third of the way down the Empire State Building. So you do an entire Empire State Building plus a third. There, does that help, Lexi?
That's so much easier for me to understand. Thank you.
I'm still doing my miles and kilometers.
I know you are.
Back to Nesta's idea, though, because 5 days later in the library, Cassian has been called in to correct Nesta's behavior. She has been nonstop practicing her training while on library duty, and that just won't do. I love that Cassian is like, has she done damage? Is her work suffering? Does she bother others? And Clotho's like, well, no, but it's distracting.
It's one of my favorite subtle ways of showing how similar these two can be. Neither Cassian nor Nesta are natural rule followers. They question the status quo and follow the rules when they understand why they should. Yes, even Cassian, who is a proud soldier, we know he disobeys orders or pushes back on them when he doesn't feel the reasoning makes sense. Same goes in this instance. The reason why Nesta shouldn't be training in the library is arbitrary, and Cassian is calling that out to Clotho. But at the end of the day, he respects the priestess and her feelings too much to disregard her request. This matters to Clotho and the other priestesses, so that's reason enough for Cassian to talk to Nesta about this.
So she gives him permission to enter the library, and he finds Nesta, who is out in the open, where anyone can see her. She's assigned 5 books as her target, and again, she's trying to get these punches right. But each time, she drops her damn elbow, something she has not done in practice with Cassian. So Cassian comes up and corrects her, politely and by asking permission before touching her arm to fix the position. I love that he had his face buried between her legs literally 5 nights ago, and he's like, can I touch your elbow? But anyway, it shows how Cassian has really differentiated the act of sex with them and the act of training. It is 2 wholly different sides of him. And then Cassian also gives her praise when she does it right and asks her to give him a few more combinations.
He's letting her know what her movements could do to an enemy, giving her a sense of power and strength against this imaginary opponent. Remember, Nesta never wants to feel weak again. Here he is saying exactly what you are doing, the work that you are currently putting in, it's making you a force to be reckoned with.
With that, he leaves her, but he notices some watchful eyes, specifically eyes that are large and teal. Gwen,
who will later admit she similarly never wants to feel weak again.
And it dawns on him. Nesta, you planned this, didn't you?
While going down the stairs the other day and thinking about her conversation with Gwen, Nesta realized she was not single-handedly going to be able to overcome Gwen's objections. Explaining the training and its benefits aren't going to be enough, not when the priestess's reluctance runs so much deeper than not previously having the opportunity. Nesta wants to show Gwen and the other priestesses the power that these females can have and the respect and professional manner in which they can receive the training. So if they're not willing to come to training and experience it for themselves, she'll bring the training to them so they can see without feeling like they're on the spot or needing to participate. For the next 5 days, Nesta continued her exercises in the library and ignored Clotho's request to stop to eventually escalate the situation to have to bring Cassian in, leading Clotho to invite Cassian into the library and real-time ask Nesta to stop training. And then we saw how Nesta pushed Cassian to show her these moves, how she loudly proclaimed that she never wants to feel weak again, and he guided her in movement to help her find that inner strength.
She is brilliant here, saying when Cassian is correcting her, quote, "I'm tired of being weak, of depending on others to defend me." This is something that she is speaking right into how the priestesses would be feeling, but maybe not voicing out loud. It's like she's acting as their consciousness here and speaking right into that fear. But sadly, at the end of the day, no names have been added to the sign-up sheet. So Nesta goes to the stairs to clear her head and work through her emotions, only though making it to stair 900. Stair math watches back. This is also 0.24 miles with our new Pythagorean theorem, or 0.38 kilometers. This is all one way. Or Lexi, which the math that I just had to do off to the side as you were talking about Nesta's plan, almost 50 floors on the Empire State Building. The fact that she only makes it to stair 900 when previously she made it to stair 2000 is providing a show don't tell for us readers that she is feeling truly defeated, and that comes with this heaviness. I love that her stair journey, it isn't linear, just like her own healing journey isn't. She doesn't continue to go further and further every single time she tries, but instead she has good days and bad days. I remember when I was running consistently and I was like training for half marathons and stuff, this was very much a part of the norm. Sometimes I had great runs where I could run for 5-10 miles easy. Sometimes I had like maybe where I could only make a few miles and I was just like, I am dying. And I just felt too weighed down. So I turn around and go back. But going back to her room, Nesta finds a new book on her nightstand, The Dance of Battle. This is not a smutty romance book from Smart House Pat.
It is not also written by George R.R. Martin, even though it's The Dance of Dragons. Every time I hear that.
I know. That's perfect. Instead, noticing a familiar scent, she recognizes that this is Cassian's book that he must have read thousands of times.
And he's left it for her, quote, deemed her worthy of whatever lay inside. This might not be her usual kind of book, but the fact that Cassian gave her this prized book of his speaks volumes to his perception of her training progress, and her strategically clever mind.
Nesta stays up late, obsessively reading this new book on war strategies. We know from Silver Flames that Nesta is a wolf who has been caged her whole life, and she's now a wolf learning how to be a wolf let out of its cage. This tapping into a new level of training, learning what these techniques are for on a deeper level. This is more and more of her learning how to be that wolf she is on the inside. Learning how to pick battlegrounds, find allies among the enemies of the enemies. Each passage has a new way of thinking for her.
It's helping her challenge her own mind, and our Ravenclaw just eats that up.
I also want to point out, like, you know, when you find something that you do and it just doesn't feel like it's work, it just doesn't, it feels like time just almost stopped. Reading fantasy books.
I was going to say, yes, I do. In fact, know what that's like.
I really want listeners to think about it. Like, what is something that you could do and do for hours, and it's like time doesn't even exist. That's exactly what it feels like for Nesta here. The Dance of Battle is also helping her heal her own PTSD from the war. Previously, thoughts of that war and the battles associated with it have been met with flashbacks and her power rising to the surface. But now it's met with methodical thinking, learning, and analyzing.
It's opening her mind and challenging her way of thinking, which she'll eventually want to apply for her own goals of putting together a female fighting legion.
This also includes her looking at Cassian's leadership style, because he follows this manuscript to a T, with the exception of one one piece of advice. He always fights with his soldiers on the front lines. This says so much about Cassian. On the positive side, it's him saying, I see myself not on a pedestal or better than you. I am battling with you, alongside you.
And he will always be the first line of defense, the protector of those he is responsible for, which Nesta can relate to in her own way as she fiercely protects those few she loves.
And, however, on the other side, it shows a glimpse of his own self-image. He still does believe himself no better than a common foot soldier, putting himself right on the front lines.
In the scene, too, I want to point out how we're starting to see Nesta really sit with her own thoughts. Instead of trying to escape them, she's mulling things over and doing some real inner self-reflection as she wonders why it matters that these priestesses show up for training. She admits to herself that the weight of all her failures threatened to shatter her into 1,000 pieces. And instead of needing to find a coping mechanism to make these difficult thoughts go away, or even going down the stairs right now, she sits with her self-awareness and even pushes herself to get to the root of the surface level problem. She's asking herself questions on top of questions to get to that deeper meaning. That's huge. The next afternoon, Nesta arrives at the library and doesn't even bother to look at the sign-up sheet. She's tired of being disappointed each day, correlating that blank sheet with her own failures, and she just can't face it anymore. Except, I love that it's Clotha who excitedly points to the sheet because she understands that this holds such a deeper meaning for Nesta and loves seeing her begin to come into her own. There's a name on the sign-up sheet. Quote, one name, ready to rule them all. Just kidding. One name, ready for tomorrow's lesson. Gwen, chills.
Before Gwen signed up, Lexi was mentioning how Nesta's reflecting on why it matters so much that the priestesses do join her in training. Nesta has felt like every aspect of her life she's failed, from Elaine to her family to relationships on every level. And if no priestesses sign up to join her, it's like she's failed in yet another way. But then Gwen's name appears on the sheet. And it's like there's that little glimmer of hope for Nesta. If you can change one person's life, help them overcome their demons, maybe you're not such a piece of shit failure after all. I want to also note how huge of a deal this is for Nesta's way of thinking. This whole book, she's been in default mode, I'm a failure. And now this is the part of her brain, thanks to this, soon-to-be family of hers with Gwen and Emery, that is starting to challenge that way of thinking. Maybe you're not such a failure, and maybe you're actually helpful for other people around you.
Especially, like, for instance, when she's invited to lunch with Emery, and Emery's like, I could use another sensible person. She's like, oh, that's me.
That's me.
Yeah.
Yes.
About a week ago, Nesta invited Gwen to join training, and she politely declined because she's not a warrior and has no reason for training. But as she'll say during her first session when Nesta asked her why she did come, quote, because I don't ever want to feel powerless again. We will later learn the depth that this comment carries for Gwen as she faces the terrible trauma of the Hybern attack, where she is haunted by believing she failed those she loved most, and she was powerless against the Hybern soldiers with what they did to her. She is ready to discover that strength and power, so she is never helpless like that again. Cassian's presence in the library, showing Nesta how to be a force against your enemies, truly resonated with Gwen when she witnessed his gentle guidance and words of encouragement yesterday, and it gave her the strength to step into the ring and say, I'm ready to be a force too.
As we enter part 2 of this book titled Blade, we have to look at the title of this long chapter stretch. Blade in Valkyrie training is the second level out of 3 levels, which really fits here. Nesta has entered this new stage of training, finally taking interest, devoting herself wholly to it, and wanting to get better, setting her own goals to get better. But also, being a Valkyrie is all about being part of a unit. So it makes sense that this is when Gwen and soon Emery joins training as well, creating this kinship that they will all find within each other.
It is just so fitting that right after Gwen puts her name down on the sheet, we move into part 2. What an ending to part 1. I just love it so much. Nesta succeeded in creating the same opportunity for another person. And even having this kind of goal, it would have been unimaginable at the beginning of this book. And I just love it so much.
Same.
It's so cute that on the first morning of Gwen's training, Nesta is so nervous. She cares about this budding friendship with Gwen, and she wants Gwen to love this training too. When Gwen arrives, she basks in the sunlight because this is the first time Gwen has been outside since she arrived at the library 2 years ago. Coming to today's session holds so much more weight than going to a workout class for her. It is Gwen's first step out of the library and coming back into the world. Even if it's on this rooftop training ring above a city, it's still open skies and fresh fresh air that she has not seen since her own horrors at Sangrava. This is her doing something somewhere that is so far out of her comfort zone, but she pushes forward with bravery because, again, she's ready to tap into her inner strength and exert that force to find her power. This is a lesson for all of us to do scary things, even if we don't have the right clothes for it, even if it's nerve-wracking to start, even if you're not sure exactly where it'll lead to. It matters. So go do that big scary thing. My dear sweet Cassian, ever the emotionally intelligent bat boy, gives her some privacy to warm up to Nesta and get adjusted to this new environment.
And during this training session, Nesta notices how Gwen is nimble. She's light on her feet. She's picking things up really quickly. I want just for a moment for us to think that if Gwen was replaced with Feyre or Elaine, Nesta would be constantly comparing herself to them and feeding that I am a failure belief. But instead, with Gwen, she just notices. There's no jealousy or negative self-talk around it. It's just is. With Gwen stepping out into the sunshine, it is important for us to know what our skin does in the sunshine. Skin changes over time, and it can be so overwhelming to figure out the right products for your skin, which is why we are so excited to be partners with Apostrophe, the sponsor for this episode. Apostrophe's goal is to help you feel confident in your own skin, whether you're stepping out into the sunlight for the first time in 2 years or not. Whether you're dealing with breakouts, signs of aging, or acne scarring, Apostrophe will help you love the skin you're in.
Apostrophe is an online platform that connects you with an expert dermatology team to get customized acne treatment for your unique skin. Through Apostrophe, you can get access to oral and topical medications that use clinically proven ingredients to help clear acne. Simply fill out an online consultation about your skin goals and medical history. It is so easy. It is so user-friendly. Then you snap a few selfies and a dermatology provider will create a customized treatment plan just for you.
I'm obsessed with my Apostrophe stuff. My skin feels so healthy, so hydrated. And one of my absolute favorite things that I've talked about endlessly on the podcast, and I'm going to bring it up again, is that they don't give you those teeny tiny little bottles that last you like a week, maybe. They give you things that I'm still using months later. They're so incredible with their products. It's easy to use, and my skin is clearing up so nicely. I love it.
We have a special deal for our audience. Get your first visit for only $5 at apostrophe.com/FF when you use our code FF. That's a savings of $15. This code is only available to our listeners. To get started, go to apostrophe.com/FF and click Get Started. Then use our code FF at sign up and you'll get your first visit for only $5. Thank you, Apostrophe, for sponsoring this episode.
After training later that day, Nesta goes up with Cassian to Windhaven because he is to meet with Eris. But high off seeing Gwen join her at training, there's a part of her mind that wants to come and visit the other female that she's had pleasant conversations with, Emery. Again, this is huge moves in the right direction for Nesta in her healing journey. She has been isolating herself, rarely seeking out anyone, especially someone for pleasant conversation.
And she's wanting to reach out her hand to help these other females. It's become her personal mission to give them the same opportunities she's been given because she believes in this training and its benefits and wants others with trauma to experience that same sense of relief and strength.
Now, she is going back to a place that was previously triggering and very difficult for her to go to for 3 days straight. And this is only 3 weeks since she last, heavy air quotes, trained here. As silly as it seems, I'm really proud for Nesta. She's choosing to surround herself with people she is reaching out her hand to. It just lays the foundation for Nesta creating her own found family so perfectly.
Emery's already occupied with someone as Nesta enters the shop, and here we meet Dickhead Bellius. He is Emery's cousin, son to her uncle on her father's side, and this uncle really insists on taking the shop from her, because you see, this shop used to be Emery's father's. After he died, Emery inherited it, and now she runs the shop, which is majorly frowned upon in Illyrian culture. Females aren't supposed to be business owners, they're supposed to be housewives. Centuries ago, soon after Rhys became High Lord, he changed the laws to allow Illyrian females to inherit as well. But Emery's family is still stuck in their old ways and don't seem to care about these new laws, so they think it's within their right to take over her father's shop instead of Emery inheriting it. Emery stays firm though. If Bellius' father, her uncle, wants a shop, he can open up one himself because this one is hers. Now, Nicole, there's an important thing to note about Bellius during his visit here, and I have not actually seen anyone else ever talk about this. It's described multiple times as his eyes being glassy and glazed, and Emery explains this away as him being drunk. She even comments how drunk midday is a new low for him. We learn that Bellius was skilled enough to go on a scouting unit to the continent and just returned. You know what happens when people go to the continent? They come back under the control of the crown. During Briallen's end of book Evil Villain monologue, we will find out that Bellius wandered off from his scouting unit on the continent to look for fun in Briallen's lands. So she showed him her idea of fun, putting him under the influence of the crown. So right here, he's not just drunk or possibly even drunk at all. Bellius is under the crown's control already, and he will be instrumental in feeding Briallen information about Nesta and Emery's friendship to use their love and loyalty against Nesta. This is another scene where we see Nesta leverage her glares and words to purposefully get under an enemy's skin. She knows exactly what she's doing as she wields her scorn and indifference, and it's fascinating to see it from her POV, versus like Farrah's when we see Nesta treat bullies in third person.
While in Emery's shop, her and her new friend start talking about those warmer leathers that Emery was looking into, and it turns out they're not cheap, and thus Nesta cannot afford it. So her new soon-to-be friend offers her to pay it off as she can. And this really takes Nesta aback. No one was ever this kind to them when they were poor. And Nesta's thoughts turn to that time in their lives, and thus a flashback of when she was desperate for someone else to take her in and feed her and Elaine. Please keep in mind that as we go into this flashback, it does include sexual assault. So please, please, please listen to your comfort level and skip ahead if needed. We know from the Wings and Embers bonus chapter in ACOSF that something happened in Nesta's past, and Cassian almost about ripped the world apart at the thought of someone putting their hands on Nesta. But it's not until this moment that we get the full extent of what that story really is. Nesta and her, I guess I'm going to call him fiance for lack of a better term, Thomas, were set to seal the deal, and he was to take her in, and Nesta hoped Elaine too. But Nesta knew his father was cruel and would never have offered food or comfort to anyone, including Nesta, and let alone Elaine. So Nesta was prepared to offer Thomas her body in exchange for any care for Elaine. But then Feyre came home with the dead elk and the Andrus pelt, and then she was taken over the wall. So Nesta broke it off with Thomas. Back in ACOTAR, she says that she broke it off because she realized he would never have the bravery to go over the wall in the first place. But I also imagine this change of heart happened because she realized that would mean he would never have the bravery to step up to his father and thus feed Nesta or Elaine. But Thomas was enraged at Nesta's rejection of him. And so he starts to tear at her dress, telling her that she's a spiteful whore and thinks that she's better than everyone. We also get a mention that she's acting like a queen, which gets our queen count up to 15. But survival instinct, thank goodness, kicks in. And just as she lets him get close, she clamps her teeth down and rips at his ear, causing him to loosen his grip, and then she breaks free and runs away.
This incident has haunted Nesta ever since, and she'll never forget the sound of her dress tearing and the fear associated with it. Only her terror and survival instinct had saved her then. But in that moment, she felt helpless and didn't know how else to save herself. She didn't have the skill to draw upon, only her instinct. And that feeling of powerlessness against a man has stuck with her. She may not be training these days to specifically counter this traumatic experience, but it is absolutely a contributing factor to her tapping into her inner strength and rising up as a force to be reckoned with. Never again. There's never a good transition out of that, so I apologize for this abruptness here. When Emery invites Nesta to join her for lunch, it takes Nesta aback, and it's like she's waiting for the other female to hear about how terrible she is and how she won't want to see her anymore then. Nesta even compares herself to Bellius, a drunk simmering with hate. But Nesta wants to be a good person. She seeks these friendships, and she finds it refreshing to be viewed as a sensible person instead of someone like Bellius. Her budding relationship with Emery and these early conversations where they're getting to know one another, they actually do differ than what we see with Gwyn, at least just a little bit.
Yeah.
I think because Emery and Nesta are so similar with their steeliness and standing up to bullies like Bellius. Now, I'm not by any means comparing the strength of each relationship with her friends, because what's beautiful about it is that each friendship brings out something different in Nesta. Gwyn brings out her softer, protective nature, and Emery helps her embrace her fiery side and accept that it is possible to be kind and tough.
As Nesta is leaving, she asks Emery if she would like to join them for training, to which Emery is like, no, that's not going to work for me. Worried that if she were to train, she would lose customers at Windhaven, and also she has no way of getting there. Which Nesta comes back with, quote, "You don't seem like a coward. Nesta, I know you're a blunt person, but woof, that is abrupt." However,
real quickly, I will say, I think that does go back to her and Emery's relationship.
I agree.
Yes, it is blunt and a little bit rude there, but it's also her being able to be her unfiltered self and
Yes.
still be accepted.
This is why this relationship was so needed for Nesta, both with Gwen and Emery. She is able to be unfiltered versus within the inner circle where she has to be filtered constantly. Later, Nesta will address and apologize for her rudeness. And it turns out that Blunt, you're a coward, was actually a wake-up call for Emery. It dawned on her that she was being small. She was staying stuck, exactly how the Illyrians treat their women to be. And instead, she realized that there's a vast world beyond Windhaven, and she doesn't want to be too cowardly to reach out for it. Emery says about this vibrant world, quote, "Maybe these lessons will make me a little less scared of it." These lessons absolutely will, because of the training, yes, but also because of the bonds she develops here. Later, when the three of them are making bracelets, Nesta will wish for, quote, "us to have the courage to go out into the world when we are ready, but always be able to find our way back to each other." Emery will find her courage to go out into the world, sort of. She'll be thrust into it, but her friends will be at her side, giving her more courage.
Jumping ahead a little, Nesta will offer an olive branch to Emery with her gift of spices and good tea, mostly because she's thinking of this other female and wants her to have all the spices and tea that she needs. But it's also another way of her tempting Emery with this friendship, with opportunities outside of Windhaven. This gift is her saying, "I heard you and I want to help," in much bigger ways than just the spices.
Speaking of spices, it's time for a very small spice watch, because I would not be me if I did not call out the fact that Nesta taking these rich spices from Valaris and sending them with Cassian to Emery, it is almost like she is following in Papa Archeron's footsteps, continuing the spice trade. Also, earlier, Nesta mentions how her father traded spices all over the world. And now Nesta is trading spices, at least in the Night Court. It just feels too parallel. Spice Watch continues. All right. I'm not going to get less hyphy because here we go. Deep breath, Nicole. That night in the dining room, Cassian is brooding at the table because his convo with Eris did not go badly necessarily. He shared the information that he needed to with Eris, so on and so forth. But Eris knows exactly how to get under Cassian's skin, saying, quote, "You flatter yourself thinking you're more than a mongrel bastard," which hits Cassian right where it hurts. Because Eris, being the shitty ally that he is in this moment, is calling out the very thing that Cassian believes about himself, that he is no more than this bastard-born brute and not deserving of any of the positions that he has.
Sometimes it's really hard to root for Eris. It's like, I know you're good in there, but don't be mean to my Cassian.
Don't be an asshole. So, in the dining room, he tells Nesta that what really irks his Nurkin is that Eris is so damn good at these word games and he always has the upper hand. And it's almost like he's having to play catch up with Eris. But Cassian is fumbling at being a beginner in this very new political warfare. Quote, "He sees through my every fumbling attempt at being clever. Maybe that makes me a stupid brute after all." Cassian! I just want to give you a hug because that's not true.
Nesta recognizes that his distraction from their conversation is not a reflection on her, which, real quick, good for you, Nesta, for not jumping to conclusions and assuming the worst. She's already letting herself become more aware of Cassian's true feelings and not incorrectly internalizing it. She's asking him questions, gently encouraging him to open up to her. And this is such a real and raw conversation as Cassian feels comfortable enough to talk through his thoughts with Nesta. It's also getting her to understand Cassian on a deeper level, how good he is in his soul and how self-conscious he is in his standing. She's seeing the direct impact of wounding words, just like those she has wielded at him. And Nesta feels so terrible that she's inflicted this kind of hurt on him in the past. Quote, "She'd do anything to get rid of that look in his eyes." She may not be able to change the past that has her enveloped in shame, but she can do something about making him feel better right here, right now. Driven by a need to chase away his hurt and sadness, to show him that she cares about him, to lift him up and remind him that he is absolutely worthy, she brushes a kiss to his neck. This isn't part of their games. This isn't her trying to get even with him or whip a smug look off his face. This is Nesta genuinely wanting to brighten Cassian's spirit and give him the love he deserves. Good thing physical touch is his love language.
And I'll also note that later it says she gave him that comfort in the only way she knew how. It does still call back a little bit to how sex is a default for her, but this is not in the way of let me numb out, or in a selfish way that it previously was for her, and let me numb out. It's a let me give him that comfort. Let me give him that reprieve from being inside his own head, but not in a negative way, if that makes sense. There is a difference there. So fingers steady, mind wholly clear, Nesta undoes his pants, and Cassian,
hey, she's able to, yay!
And Cassian springs out.
Boing!
Holy shit, his dick is enormous. So large that she needs to reevaluate her approach that she needs to take. How enormous, you ask?
Let me get a visual for you all here. I don't even think this is big enough.
That as she goes to grasp it, she's not able to fully fit her hand around it. Like, good God.
So we can confirm he has a bigger wingspan than Reese.
You can say it. His dick is bigger than Reese.
Well, no, because back in an earlier book, there was like a serious debate about it. And it's like, I'm sorry, Reese, you lose.
Listen, it's not the size that matters.
Oh, I know. I'm not saying it is. I'm simply pointing out facts.
So she asks Cassian, how do you and your big dick like it? Soft, medium, or hard? I'll give you one guess as to which one he likes. And Nesta goes to town on his downtown. I love this little note about how she takes, I can't believe I'm saying this, about how when she takes him in her mouth, quote, the taste of him filled her mouth, salt and something more, something vital. Mating bond hint. We also get another queen mention because as Cassian roars in pleasure, she looks up at him, quote, a queen triumphant, bringing our queen count now to 16. So because this is our first male POV spicy scene, get ready for a smut love letter sucking dick edition. We've had so many instances where a male partner in a book has gone down on a girl, and we've discussed how it is so attractive to read because of how into it they are, especially when we as women can sometimes feel really vulnerable in those positions. See Iron Flame episode 9 for more on that subject. But now I want to focus on how attractive it is to read this type of scene about a female partner pleasuring a guy in this way, being in control, getting into it, but watching a male partner on the page lose control. Because it is really hot to have a scene where both partners are just as into it when only one is getting pleasured. In scenes like this, it's not about the satisfaction of one party, as we talked about earlier with Nesta, or with Cassian going down on Nesta, but instead it's almost like giving is in and of its way a reward. And for a female partner to be in the driver's seat, taking charge, and having a male partner be so reactive, I'll say, it flips the script on old narratives. Ones that say women's role is to be passive in the bedroom, to be the one receiving, to let the guy take the reins, so on and so forth. Instead, scenes like this show us what happens when she takes charge, or women take charge in these scenarios, and drive him directly to the edge of oblivion. Plus, I will never not adore in romantasy how there's this one common phrase that is always used, and that phrase is, he unleashed himself. Reading about a partner losing all semblance of control is hot. The grabbing of the hair, the fucking of her mouth, it's hot. I'll call it out. Because Cassian, like many men in romantasy, is one who is always normally in control. But the unleashing is this fierce vulnerability in and of itself. So, thank you, Smut, for teaching us to see control as seductive from a woman's point of view, for reminding us that giving is sometimes just as erotic and exciting as receiving, and for showing us that watching a partner come undone, knowing we're the reason, is an empowerment like no other.
That was beautiful, Nicole.
Thank you.
But giving Cassian head in the dining room is just the beginning. Wrapped up in their horny frenzy, Nesta's about to take her pants off so he can fuck her on this table right now, his words. And, quote, steps scuffed down the hall, a warning from someone who knew how to be silent. Welcome to the dining room, cock block as. His timing is impeccable. I like to think down the hall, he's like, okay, Cass, you can unleash yourself with this blowjob. And then when he realizes they're about to have sex, he's like, oh, no, I'm hungry. Hold on now.
I die laughing every time I read because Cassian, as Azrael comes in, Cassian goes, as. It's like, bro, what the fuck? I love it.
And then later, Az is like, save some for later. Like, less of a chaperone and more of a slow burn coach. I love how he's not even trying to stop them from doing their thing. I mean, yes, literally in this moment, but overall, he isn't scolding Cassian for getting involved with Nesta. He's just like, maybe not where I eat, please.
Well, let's not forget that when they were in their 20s, when they were young bat boys, they fucked people in the same room as each other. So they're quite familiar with sharing surfaces.
Yeah, they should all know that Cassian wins the big wingspan. Or at least beats Rhys. We don't know Azriel's situation yet.
God, I can't wait to find out.
Oh, the internet's going to go crazy.
All right, with that, it is time for the first training session with Emery, Gwen, and Nesta together. Hooray! Way of a 90-degree pivot. That morning, Nesta enters the training ring to see that Rhys has dropped off Emery for the day's lesson. Looked like those spices really worked wonders.
Like Nicole said earlier, Nesta's conversation and bluntness to Emery helped her set aside her excuses not to come to training and to make it happen anyway. Emery wants to be here, and she isn't willing to let her culture or even her work stop her from getting out into the world. We already know that Emery is a bold and steely female. Remember how much she reminded Cassian of Nesta back in Frost and Starlight. And this is her holding her head high and saying, I'm going to do what I want. She was already doing this by inheriting her father's shop and being the only female shop owner at Windhaven. And now she's going to do it with training, which we all know how the Illyrians feel about females training.
And while Gwen is nimble on her feet and quickly picks up movements, Emery is less so. Cassian comments that this is due to her wings, which normally provide a natural counterbalance. But because Emery's wings were clipped, those key muscles were impacted and were never able to fully develop. Cassian goes on to ask about how it happened, who did it, and so forth. And while Emery reluctantly shares, it's clear that this is not something that she enjoys talking about. We know we have talked a lot about Cassian's emotional intelligence and how it is off the flipping charts, so often being able to subtly direct conversation based on someone's body language. But here, I think he's so lost in his, I'll say, anger and frustration, most of all, at the Illyrian customs and how he is determined to put a stop to this type of treatment. And that clouds his emotional intelligence in this moment.
Absolutely agree, yes.
But Nesta does notice the discomfort of her friend and directs the conversation away from the chit-chat and instead towards the exercises because they only have her for an hour.
The heart of this book begins to take shape on the page. These three females are beginning their training and they're getting to know one another. Gwen, being the kind and curious person she is, quickly falls into an easy conversation with Emery, to no one's surprise. And like we readers can truly understand and relate, these three bond over their love of books. We've talked on the podcast about the meta meaning of books for Nesta, and I love how it is also reflected in this friendship. These females are able to come together and share their love for reading, introduce new books to each other, giggle over favorites. There's something special about connecting with others over books, as we all know. It's what makes this book community so incredible as we lean on each other in these stories when we need it most.
Emery introduces the two females to an author named Selin Drake, which of course caused me to go down a rabbit hole. Specialist_cat 502 on Reddit mentions how while there's no Selin Drake, there is a Celine Drake who is a romance novelist and definitely has her fair share of spicy scenes. But where this Reddit article absolutely sealed its place in one of my favorite Reddit articles was the comment section, because apparently it's a running joke that Selin Drake is actually a pen name for one of our favorite beloved characters. The top hits include Helion, where none of the stories are actually fictional and they're based on his real life erotic escapades. And my personal favorite, apparently there is a fan fiction somewhere on the internet that Selin Drake is actually Azriel. I looked for this fan fiction and I cannot find it. So if there is anyone out there who knows where it is, please, for the love of God, hit me up, because that kills me.
That is I'm sorry, it's canon that it's Helion and it's his
absolutely. But they're all real. They're all his
yes,
real
absolutely, yes.
Cassian wonders if one of the reasons the females get along so well and have that easiness he's never witnessed Nesta having with anyone, including Elaine, is because with Gwen and Emery, she is just simply Nesta, not Nesta the sister, Nesta the protector, Nesta the monster. It's the clean slate that she needed. But the hour is up and our Rhys Uber is here to come get Emery. As Nesta and Rhys say their greetings, Rhys knocks on Nesta's mental door, asking permission to speak into her mind. that's not the last time we'll see him do that. I love this little detail about how she opens the door. That's it's not even a door. It's like the peephole. And I just see it so vividly.
I always think of The Princess Bride when he opens up the door. What do you want?
But Rhys says to Nesta in her little peephole, quote, "You are to treat Gwen with kindness and respect." Ah, Rhys.
L
for Rhys.
L.
We readers see this and we have a jump scare of what the fuck moment? Way to jump to conclusions, my guy. But that's just because we have been with Nesta and we see how it is different with Gwen and Emery. And like we always do, I do want to approach this, even though this is an L for Rhys, I do want to approach this from Rhys's point of view and try again this episode to make his decisions make sense. He has only seen Nesta interact with Elaine and Feyre, and she does not treat them or anyone in the Inner Circle with kindness and respect, at least at the time being. She knows exactly how to get under someone's skin and pinpoint the worst things about themselves. So it does make sense that he would assume this is how she treats everyone around her. He has worked so hard to give the priestesses a safe space where they can heal and learn to enjoy life again, or at least just learn how to breathe again. And Nesta, again, from what he has seen, does not seem like that safe space for a priestess to be around.
Real quickly, it is interesting because he also spearheaded the plan to send Nesta to the library where the priestesses are. If he worried so much about her behavior, which again makes sense given all the context that he does have about her, if he worried so much about her behavior, why would he ask Clotho in the first place for her to come to the priestesses library?
Well, I'm also going to throw another what the fuck in here as well, because Rhys does not give her even 10 minutes to just observe how she's acting differently, which that feels very un-Rhys-an to me. He is always someone who looks at things with a critical eye. He's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. And this is jumping to conclusions really quickly, which doesn't feel like Rhys.
I'm telling you, those pregnancy hormones are really getting to him. Thankfully and unsurprisingly, Cassian jumps to Nesta's defense. He recognizes that Rhys said something to her, and he's mad at his brother for being unwilling to believe even one good thing about Nesta. Cassian has seen Nesta at her best and worst, and he's central to her healing journey and is wholeheartedly supporting her because he understands she is going through a lot of internal conflict, and that at her core, she is a good person. He sees who she truly is, and he accepts her. Meanwhile, Rhys is baiting her and assuming the worst always. The more he treats Nesta like this, the more she'll lash out. At least Cassian's defense registers with Rhys. He realized that he jumped to conclusions and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. We don't hear Rhys say sorry very often, and at least we do get that here.
Tensions are so high, and I think everyone needs to cool off with a quick trip to the water station and have a nice tall glass of Element.
Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix and sparkling electrolyte water born from the growing body of research revealing that optimal health outcomes occur at sodium levels 2 to 3 times government recommendations. Each stick pack or sparkling can deliver a meaningful dose of electrolytes free of sugar, artificial flavors, or other dodgy ingredients. Element is formulated for anyone on a mission to restore health through hydration and is perfectly suited for athletes, folks who are fasting, or for those following keto, low-carb, whole food, or paleo diets.
I've been open about starting a more HIIT workout routine. And I just finished actually my 25th class yesterday. It was very exciting. And one of the big things that helps me recover after these really high intensity workouts is absolutely Element. My favorite element, and at least the one that I'm obsessed with right now, is watermelon salt sparkling.
That's one of my favorites too.
It's so good. I love sparkling water, and having the sparkling water version of Element is just I love it so much. It makes me purr.
Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single serving packets free with any Element order. It's such a great way to try all 8 flavors or share Element with a salty friend. Get yours at drinklmnt.com/FFG. This deal is only available through our link. So head over to the link drinklmnt.com/FFG. Also, be sure to try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. All right, friends, let's turn our full attention to foreshadowing important moments in the rest of this book and speculation for what's next.
Favorite mentions how Elaine has Azriel beat for secret keeping. Ah, yes, just more and more foreshadowing for Elaine and Azriel being very, very similar. This also obviously could be reasons for why they end up together and foreshadowing for the Elaine and Azriel, but the hints are getting a little on the nose, which makes me think, Are we being directed to think that they're going to be together and then it's going to be psych they're not? Or is this just Sarah J. Maas leaning into the romance and the cheese a little bit?
I really do think that while they're not going to be in game, I do think that they need to have this with each other. They do need to have the slow burn with one another so that they can then eventually go to who they are supposed to be with.
Yep, I agree. Speaking of on the nose, Cassian notes how Asriel's longing glances at more are becoming few and far between. Quote, after 500 years, he'd somehow given up. Cassian couldn't think why. Well, we know why.
Because of Elaine. And that really does show that he is romantically interested in her. We will know that absolutely from his bonus episode. But
his dick gets hard putting a necklace on her. Hometown boy.
And on that note, with dicks getting hard, as Cassian is thinking about why he couldn't remember the last time he'd been so driven by sexual desire as he was the night he went down on Nesta, quote, some small, quiet part of his brain whispered otherwise. He ignored it, had ignored it for a long time now.
Mating bond, mating bond, mating bond, hint. The little part of his brain is like, oh, really? Because I think you've been feeling that way towards a particular someone for 2 years now, my guy. Another foreshadowing moment. Emery tells Nesta that she has no mate or husband at home to bother her. Quote, she spoke a bit tensely, like there was more to it than that. There is more to it because it seems she is also hiding that she likes females, something her and Moore might be able to bond over in a future book. Emery also mentions how she has nowhere to go, which is why she doesn't leave Illyria. I could absolutely see Emery moving to the House of Wind or somewhere in Valaris in a future book, especially if her and Moore get together, or even just to be closer to Gwen and Nesta, which would possibly then bring her and Moore together.
I love that idea. I don't see her being in the House of Wind. I could see her going to the townhouse. It is empty right now, and she wouldn't have to worry about going up and down the 10,000 steps, even though she's a badass Valkyrie and could do it.
Well, but if she gets her wings healed, she might be able to learn how to fly to and from the House of Wind.
I don't know if anybody wants to be in that House of Wind with all the sex that Cassian and Nesta have. I would totally be like, there is a perfectly wonderful townhouse. I will go take that.
Maybe her and Moore take over the townhouse and that becomes their gift from the High Lord. I love that.
Can you imagine how girlified Moore would make that townhouse than it already is?
Honestly, I would live there in a heartbeat with Moore. That sounds amazing. Nesta mentions how there's a cousin of her mother's who lives on the continent who conveniently forgot about them, whose name is Erston. Yes, I looked up all the name meanings of Erston and couldn't find anything that actually is telling. But this cousin might be able to tell them about their lineage. That might be a future ACOTAR plot.
Oh, so see, I don't think that this human cousin on the continent has secret information to share, but it does remind me of the passage we'll get in chapter 33. This is from Nessa's POV, quote, she knew how to swim. Her mother had made sure of it, thanks to a cousin who had drowned in childhood. Murdered by fairies, her mother had claimed. I saw her dragged into the river. Had it been a Kelpie or her mother's own fears warped into something monstrous? What if it was this cousin's sibling that died? Now, I will say, I do think that the cousin would have had to move to the continent from the Prithian human realm, since their mother does seem to be from this region. But that's 2 mentions in one book about the Archeron cousins.
Like, there's no way they won't come into play at some point. And it just feels like little Easter egg planting.
I think that we're going to learn a lot more about the Archeron lineage because it does feel like we have had little hints about it. But as far as this cousin being a big role, I don't think that.
I don't think it's big role. I just think minor role, side role, extra role, if you will.
I think it's just one more hint that there is more to the family. Yeah. Or it's just here for backstory development. Emery says that her mother died in childbirth with her. However, later in this book, she shares that her father beat her mother so badly that she died from it. And Emery's father told everyone her mother died in childbirth. Not with Emery, of course, but with another baby. I initially thought that this was an editing error, but now I realize this is Emery not sharing the full truth with Nesta yet. The true history of her father's torment is deeply personal, and she isn't ready to tell Nesta the darkest reality yet.
When Nesta and Gwen are talking about the Dread Trove, Gwen mentions how she asked Meryl about it last night, and Meryl was able to break through that glamour that the Dread Trove has put on everyone, meaning that she was able to suddenly remember the Dread Trove. This seems very sus and should be a really big deal, right? This means that Meryl would be extremely powerful, like Amryn level of powerful. I am convinced she's going to play a bigger role in some form or fashion.
She is the descendant of the Lord of the Western Wind, and there is so much mention of the wind holding power and communicating in the series. I don't know if that's related, but I could see her being able to tap into the land's magic in a more powerful way others can't because she is tied to its ancestral magic, which connects her more to the cauldron than others, and maybe why she's able to break through the cauldron-made object's glamour.
I will have some more theories, but we will cover that when we cover that chapter with Rabith and the Lord of the Western Wind. For now, let's move on to another thing that gives us a headache, and that is the Dread Trove sipping tea with the Suriel. Every episode, Lexi is going to sit down and walk us through a world-building topic to help us better understand the world and the people in it.
While the majority of this Dread Trove Suriel Teatime will be in this segment with minimal information pulled from the Maasverse, there is going to be a spoilery part 2 in Maasverse Madness. First things first, what is the Dread Trove? The Dread Trove consists of the last 3 remaining made objects of great power. You see, the Daglin used the cauldron to make multiple powerful magical objects tens of thousands of years ago, and we all know how mighty the cauldron is. So anything made from the cauldron with some of its power imbued in it is extra powerful in this world and doesn't necessarily abide by the standard laws of magic. The Daglin used these instruments for conquest, but then they went unused since the Daglin argued over which of them should control these powerful objects, which eventually resulted in their downfall. At the time Amren went into the prison more than 16,000 years ago, there were only 3 of these made objects left that hadn't been lost to history and war, although some claimed there were 4 or that the 4th object had been unmade. Dun dun dun. According to Reese, those who possessed the Dread Trove grew careless. They were lost in ancient wars or to treachery or simply because they were misplaced and forgotten. Because the trove is made, someone who is also made can track down the objects of the trove. And once the Dread Trove is united, the potency of their combined made essence can be used to track the cauldron, no matter where it is or how well it is concealed. This is why Brialyn wants the trove so badly, as she hopes to get her youth back from the cauldron that turned her into an old crone. Nesta is particularly unique when it comes to the trove because the power she took from the cauldron allows her to be able to summon these made objects to her no matter the wards around them. No one really knows the full scope of the trove's powers, but we can assume that the greater power of these 3 combined is unfathomable. Koschei especially wants the trove, which is why he's working with Brialyn to obtain it. Yes, because the objects will have the power to free him from his lake, but being an ancient death god, he may very well know something about the trove that no one else in the world knows. Insert future ACOTAR plot here. Later in Silver Flames, we will see how Nesta is able to use all 3 objects to stop time and save Farah, Rhysand, and baby Nyx during Farah's fatal labor and delivery. There's more to it with Nesta bargaining with the cauldron to save them and she'll give the power back. This leads both Farah and Nesta's bodies to alter so they can bear Illyrian children, but we're not going down that rabbit hole today. According to Amren, the Dread Trove objects have a sentience. Made objects back when wild magic still roamed free tended to gain their own self-awareness and desires, meaning the Trove only allows someone to remember the objects if they want them to know. The Trove uses a glamour so the objects are forgotten by pretty much everyone in the world. Made people are an exception since they all come from the same cauldron and the glamour is then removed. Someone like Meryl is able to break through the glamour and remember, and Amren has a hypothesis that once you learn of the Trove, like Azriel did, the glamour spell is broken. Or maybe now the Dread Trove believes it's time for certain people to know about it for some dark reason of its own, and it purposefully removes the forgetful glamour. Let's walk through each of these 3 made objects that make up the Dread Trove. First, we have the mask. It is a golden death mask molded from the face of a long-forgotten king. It is primitive in appearance and embossed with ancient whorls and patterns. It's also on the cover of Silver Flames. The wearer of the mask has the power over death, meaning it has the ability to summon and command the dead. Whew, spooky. Now, don't confuse this with resurrection. This is literally raising the dead, and the dead are in the wearer's control. However, it is said that most who have worn the mask could never remove it, so the only way to sever the bond with the mask is to behead the wearer. Nesta, of course, will be the exception because it's hypothesized that only someone made from the same dark source can wear it and not be ruled over it. When Nesta will don the mask, any human feelings of terror, anger, or desperation vanish, and she will not understand hate or love or fear or grief. She'll become something that does not need air to breathe. Interestingly, Helion will feel a more intense feeling than the others when in proximity of the mask. He'll uniquely feel like cold claws are raking down his senses, and he'll wonder if it's because an ancestor of his once used the mask, and the warning of its cost is imprinted upon his blood. Okay, I want to know more about that, but moving on. The mask is currently lost in the Bog of Ord, which is the marshlands of the middle. We will get to know that very closely next episode. And Nesta will track it down while scrying. Next up, there is the harp. It is a small golden harp with 26 silver strings, 26 strings for 26 dimensions. The harp's magical abilities are the least straightforward of the Dread Trove objects, so here goes. It can open any door, physical or otherwise, including breaking through wards like at the prison. It's capable of opening portals to different locations and realities, transferring objects and magic, as well as altering an environment. The small strings are for light movement and leaping. Like the first string will move Nesta within the prison. 3 strings at once will transport Nesta and Cassian from the prison to Thera and Reese's river house. The longer, final strings bring about great and monstrous magic. The 26th string is time itself, quote, that even death bowed to the final string. That time was of no consequence to the harp. It can stop time, pretty much. The harp doesn't just move its bearer through the world. It can also move things like magic from one soul to another. When Nesta will touch the harp, it will open up a mental pathway between her and Brialyn while she's wearing the crown. This will be a pathway between their minds and eyes, enabling Brialyn to learn everything she needs to about Nesta, her life, and those she loves. At this point in our story, the harp is hidden beneath the prison. Okay, time to talk about a less complicated magical object, the crown. It's a large crown made out of golden spikes. It can influence anyone, even piercing through powerful mental shields. The wearer controls the minds of others, so they do the wearer's biddings. For instance, it can make a parent slaughter their child, aware of the horror but unable to stop themselves. Oh my God, that's the worst nightmare. However, the crown requires close physical proximity to initially sink its claws into a victim's mind. When someone is under the influence of the crown, it's as if a fog is wrapped around their mind, swaying them. It's described as a mist or fog with, quote, nothing to grasp onto, nothing tangible to break, yet it was there. Brialyn is currently in possession of the crown, though we're not sure where she retrieved it from. And finally, we have the rumored 4th object. From Lanthus's vision, Nesta is shown how they could rule together with the help of the Dread Trove. It includes a 4th object veiled in shadow. Unfortunately, she can't make out more than a gleam of age-worn bone. If only we had more information on this! And on that note, that's a wrap for our Suriel Teatime Part 1 on the Dread Trove.
Emphasis on Part 1. But before we get into Part 2, let us move into our favorite moments. This is ACOTAR only. Amren wearing a huge jacket, and when Cassian makes fun of her, she says, quote, keep talking like that, and it'll be your pelt I wear tomorrow. This is amazing, first and foremost, just because what a clapback. But also, I relate so hard to the huge jacket, not wearing someone's skin, but like the huge jacket when it's like not super cold outside. I love that.
Rhys and Nesta's silent exchange that has Nesta recognize her own Fae instinct to let Rhys know she is not a threat to his mate. It's clear that these two have their own relationship, one that is strained and butting heads, but I don't know, it feels realistic for their two sides of the same coin personalities.
Totally. Cassian and Azriel having their own chairs and sitting in the room that like separates their two chambers. This is some big Chandler and Joey in their Burger Lounger energy from Friends. And they know exactly whose chair is whose.
Yes.
Cassian wanting children and thinking about how his children will never know a moment of cold, hunger, or pain. Oh,
aww. He's my favorite. Such a good dad.
He would be such a good dad. The opening line of chapter 23. I'm quoting the entire thing. Quote, watching Nesta climax had been as close to a religious experience as Cassian had ever had. Nothing will top that. It's so good.
I loved getting to see Nesta and Azriel's friendship start to grow in these episodes. And also, he's never said a bad word about her.
I love that Nesta's coping skills of breathing is showing up more and more and more on the page. We're only on episode 4, and she's already starting to naturally fall into a breathing pattern to ease her anxiety. Go, Nesta!
And lastly, Rhys tells Cassian that this house reeks of sex. Cassian's like, yeah, it does.
No, Cassian's like, we haven't even gotten started, bro.
All right, friends, that is it for our ACOTAR only part. Today's Maasverse Madness includes spoilers for all 3 Crescent City books, especially House of Flame and Shadow. So if you have not read House of Flame and Shadow, this is where we part ways. But before you go, reminder that next episode, we will be covering Silver Flames, chapters 29 through 38. We are going back to the middle.
Yes! But first, a huge shout out to our newest members of the Inner Circle for our Patreon. We have Pascal, Cassie S., Carlina, and Alex B. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Inner Circle.
Thank you so much for being part of our Inner Circle. And if you're listening and like, hey, I want my name read out on the podcast too, please be sure to join the Patreon party. And of course, if you want more content from Fantasy Fangirls and lots of announcements and all of the fun goodies, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Fantasy Fangirls Pod.
Also, do not forget to rate and review the podcast. It takes literally 5 seconds, and it's one of the best things you can do, not only for this show, but for any show that you listen to. Let's get into Maasverse Madness. This is a juicy one today.
Okay, we are officially entering our Maasverse Madness segment of the episode, where we call out series crossover references and discuss theories. Today, we are discussing concepts that give spoilers from all 3 Crescent City books, most of all, House of Flame and Shadow, so please only continue listening if you've read the series. Okay, so first and foremost, let's keep the Suriel Teatime on the Dread Trove going. Also, real quick, you all, it is getting so hard with Silver Flames and discussing some of these concepts and having to keep the spoilers out of it.
Because it's like some things that we absolutely know from Crescent City are only speculatory in ACOTAR. So it's like, we have to be like, well, and there's this possible 4th object. Let's Luna's horn. Like, it's so hard.
And I'm also not trying to make these like Crescent City Suriel Teatimes either. So I'm trying to make sure that it is relevant to ACOTAR. So anyway, here goes. We have to spill the beans on the 4th Dread Trove object, Luna's horn. This could honestly be its own episode, so I'm going to do my best to summarize it as it relates to the Dread Trove. The horn, made out of ancient bone, is able to open the rifts between worlds, and it serves as a bridge between realms. How useful for a multiverse! This is seriously one of my favorite parts about how the Maasverse connects. When this all unraveled with the 4th Dread Trove object and all of that, my jaw was on the floor, and I was so excited. More than 15,000 years ago, when the horn was on its home planet where ACOTAR is, and the Asteri/Daglin were defeated, Queen Thea used the horn and the harp to open a portal into Midgard and lead her people, plus some from the Autumn Court, to this seemingly welcome planet. Her daughters, Helena and Selene, used the horn and the harp to open up a portal back into Prythian, but only Selene, the harp, and Truth Teller made it back. Both Helena and the horn stayed behind in Midgard. After this, and the battle with Thea where she was killed, Peleus, the first Starborn Prince, and High King Theon's High General, took the horn, as well as the Star Sword, and started crafting his own story. That's a whole other topic, though, that I'm not going to get into right now. Ultimately, the horn broke. The Fae and the Asteri tried to renew it through magic and spells, but no luck. It was then given a place of honor in the Asteri archives before it was transferred to Lunathian, Luna's temple, after the city's establishment. Danica stole the horn, ground it up into powder, and had it tattooed to Bryce Quinlan's back with witch ink. This made Bryce unknowingly the bearer of the horn, and because she is Starborn Fae, she is the only one who can wield the horn.
Wait, pause. Hold on. Because if she's Starborn Fae, then if also the Archeron sisters are Starborn Fae, specifically Nesta, that would also be another reason why she can wield all 3 objects and live to tell the tale, in addition to being such a powerful maid person. Or is that stretching?
It's confusing.
Keep going.
This gave me quite the headache. Let's just leave it at that. All right, let's talk more about the Dread Trove history. Fionn and Thea spearheaded the defeat of the Daglin, using their own weapons against them. Now, of course, this does include Truth Teller and the Star Sword, but it also includes the Dread Trove items. Thea found them where they were hidden under Ramiel, and then she took them, and then they partly used those to defeat the Daglin. Then, after defeating High King Fionn, Thea took the Trove for herself, and then she became High Queen of Prythian Prythian, and she had unchecked limitless power. But she wanted more than what the Fae homeland could offer. So I'm assuming she hid the mask and the crown before departing with the harp and the horn. That is why it was last known to be on Prythian, because she hid them in Prythian. Fast forward to Selene returning with the harp. Of course, she is the one who hid the harp in the prison. Once on Midgard, we find out that the Asteri have been looking for the Dread Trove. They are on a mission to find the Dread Trove. In fact, even in present day, before the Asteri are killed or sucked into the black hole, whatever you want to call that, before Bryce defeats the Asteri, they have been looking for this homeland because they want that Dread Trove back. So when Selene returned back to the homeland with the harp, of course, she is the one who hid the harp in the prison. I'm not going to get into all of that quite yet. We will be going to the prison in a later episode, so I'll put a pin in that with all the harp and prison stuff there.
I was listening to the prison part of the book just like this morning or like even last night. And I swear to God, I felt like I was going on a trip. Like once you know all the Maasverse connections and then there's the people like banging in the walls and all this, it's just, it's so good. But we're not there yet. However, like Lexi mentioned during the Suriel part of the ACOTAR part of the episode regarding the mask, it is mentioned how no one can take on and off the mask and live to tell the tale except for Nesta. However, we know 2 other people who also can take the mask on and off. Bryce, who has the maid object tattooed on her back, is able to wear the mask and take it off without any repercussions. But so is Hunt, who is able to slip the mask on and off, and he slips the mask on to escape death in the final battle. But yes, putting on the mask is very painful. It basically rips his soul apart, but he is able to take it off, or it actually kind of falls off, and live to tell the tale. Because Bryce and Hunt have magical maid sex the night before, and therefore Hunt is maid?
So the way that I see it is because we know that the harp can transport magic from one person to another. For instance, that is how Thea transported her raw starborn magic into both of her daughters. I think that maybe that's not necessarily only a harp thing, but it is something that the horn gives Bryce that ability to do as well. And I also have a new theory that I had called you about yesterday, and we'll get into this more later because I'm still processing through all of it. But maybe Nesta is, I'll call it the chosen starborn, because when she was made, the Cauldron transferred that magic really up front and center for her versus it being diluted through thousands of years of ancestry.
Yes. Oh, God. We need to stop or else I'm going to just break out in hives.
Maasverse is getting really hard because like these could be their own episodes and we can't let them be their own episodes. Maybe someday, but not right now.
All right, friends, that is it for episode 4 of not House of Flame and Shadow, of Silver Flames.
I mean, tomato. Next week, we will be covering chapters 29 through 38 of Silver Flames.
And we want to give a special new thank you to our brand new content researcher, Brooke. Thank you so much for making Lexi's head hurt less this week. And of course, as always, thank you to our executive producer, aka our sanity manager, Hayden. We freaking love you both. And of course, last but not least, do not forget to share this episode with your fellow Silver Flame friends. If you enjoyed the dining room scene and all dining room scenes, just like a friend of yours, this is a perfect episode to send to them so you can both use your hand to demonstrate on a water bottle. Cassian's dick is enormous. I'm done saying that, I swear. No, I'm not.
All right, friends, we gotta go. Goodbye.
Bye.
But these aren't...
Which pause. I have to say, I am feral for a Cassian and Nesta.
How is this the transition? Hold on.
Go to horny jail. Hayden. Oh my. I'm just gonna say scene. There you go.